Welcome everybody to LA Times. Thank you for tuning in. We got a special treat today, but in the house as usual for interviews and the Raza Roundtable is my partner, my co-host, Big Joe. What's
Hey,
happening, Joe?
hey, everybody, how you doing? Doing good, doing really good. Just glad to be here today to be on this special podcast that we got today. I just
Yeah, you
yeah,
guys
be
stick
great.
around, huh? Stick around to the end, guys. Hear this story. You're gonna hear some crazy stuff. So, with that, I want to introduce the host of the Sheepdog Assist podcast and also Rolling with the Punches podcast on YouTube. This guy was part of the prison gang task force in the CDC of California. He was a PD in San Diego. He hunted people in Mexico. You guys stick around for all of it. I want to introduce David Contreras. Howard, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Joe, for inviting me to be on your show. I was telling you, Joe, that prior that I watch your show a lot. I enjoy listening to you guys, and when I received your invitation, Paul, I feel honored and thank you once again. Thank you for the invite. It's a
Yeah,
pleasure.
we're
Yeah,
blessed.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're blessed, man. And with that, we're going to get to the first question, man, and get this thing rolling. Here we go, guys. Where did you grow up? How did you grow up?
Well, before I answer that, Paul, I'd like to make one declaration. As of a year ago, God used my son to bring me back to the Lord, and God used them. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't have started Sheepdog Assist, a program to help officers, military, gang members, anybody victims of sexual abuse suffering from PTSD or depression. I wouldn't have started that. And I definitely would not have been on your show because I was so full of hate and anger and suffering from PTSD myself that I never would have given the time. And it's by the grace of God and that I'm able to do this. And this is probably the first time that I ever actually talk about my personal life, where I grew up, and so forth. I was that guy, Joe, that always ran from my past. And what I mean from my past, I didn't have a bad past. I had a great past. But I'll explain as we go along. But like I said, this is the very first time that I ever share with anybody, with anybody, especially on video, my past. Real brief, I was born in Tijuana, Mexico. At the age of 6 months old, my parents migrated from Tijuana to Chula Vista to San Diego. I was raised in Chula Vista. Those of you that aren't familiar, it's probably about 10-minute drive to the border. You have San Isidro, you have Otay, and then you have Chula Vista, National City, San Diego, and so forth. I was raised in Chula Vista. And as a young man, well, I was raised, believe it or not, in the Apostolic Church, in the Pentecostal Church, tongue talking, devil chasing church. And, we sing with banderos and music, and, everybody was worshiping the Lord. That's the environment that I grew up in. My grandfather was a pastor of one of the biggest churches in Mexico. Later, my dad became a pastor. He became an elder. He became a bishop. And that's the environment that I was raised in. Growing up in Chula Vista, I was that kid that was always defending the poor and always defending the weak. And always back then, I'm talking about 1968, 1970, 72, people that had dyslexia, you guys are probably too young to know this, that had dyslexia, they just put them in regular school. And we knew they were slow because they just couldn't read. They just couldn't speak right. And everybody would make fun of them. And there was a special little corner where they would put these people. Well, those were my friends. Those were the ones that I would always protect. Even as a young age, I always had a group of those special needs kids that I befriended them because everybody hated them or everybody laughed at them. And I became their defender. I was the one growing up that hated bullies. I was the one that would always get into a fight with a bully. I'd get my butt kicked or I'd beat them down, but I was that guy growing up. And as I was growing up, I always wanted to be a police officer. For whatever reason, I didn't know any police officers. We were first generation San Diegans, first generation from Mexico into the United States. We didn't know anything about colleges, universities. All we knew is you go to elementary school, you go to junior high school, you go to high school, and then what's next, right? So I always wanted to be a police officer, and I'm going to tell you, and I became a police officer. I'll get into that. But my first experience with a police officer, it's funny. I've taught several classes about, I taught at one of the local colleges for several years, and I would always ask the students. I would always tell them, your first experience was a police officer, was it a positive or a negative? And then I'd make them think. And then I'd say, how many of you had a positive experience with a police officer? And I'd have 30 students, not one hand would ever go up. And I go, how many of you had a negative experience? And all 30 hands would go up. And then I'd hear one or two stories. Well, my first experience, like I said, I was that defender. I was 13 years old, 12 or 13 years old. I went to my high school football game. There was a big riot between Castle Park and National City. They had a big rivalry. People from San Diego are going to understand. Your people from Orange County are going to go, where the heck is Castle Park? But people from San Diego are going to understand. There was a big rivalry and there was a huge gang fight everywhere. But I went because I love football and I was there to watch the game. And because of the fight, they broke the game up and they started basically scattering people. But before they stopped the game, our Castle Park was getting ready to score. I'll never forget. And I'm watching this game, and a big cop, big, tall, white guy, and a bunch of cops formed a skirmish line, and they started moving people. And as they started moving people, here's a chubby little 12-year-old little boy watching his football game for the first time, getting to go to a high school game. And here comes this big old white guy. And I remember back then they used to have batons, but they were straight batons made out of probably wood or steel. I can't remember, but I remember he came up to me and I was looking at the game. I mean, I wasn't in the fight. I was looking at the game and he hit me so hard in my solar plex. He hit me so hard that I fell to the ground and I couldn't breathe. Here's a little 12-year-old boy and people are running, jumping over me and I can't breathe. And this cop kept going and kept going. The skirmish line kept going. I'm there. I can't breathe. Well, the bottom line is, I had the black and blue mark probably for about 6 months. That was my first experience with a police officer. And believe it or not, Paul, instead of hating that cop, I always told myself, when I become a cop, I'm not going to be like him. When I become a cop, I'm never going to hit a little boy. I'm never going to, if there's no threat, I posed no threat to that cop. But I always told myself that, right? So now I'm getting ready to graduate from high school. Now the years have gone by. I'm getting ready to graduate from high school. Well, by the way, I gave my life to the Lord when I was 13 years old. I gave my life. God did a miracle in my life and it was a beautiful experience. And I lived for God from the age of 13 years old. And I'll get more into that. In school, I would testify to people, talk to them about the Lord and so forth. Saw the movie, The Cross and the Switchblade and with Nikki Cruz and Dave Wilkerson. So now I'm getting ready to graduate from high school. My school counselor, Mr. Snow, calls me into the office and he says, David, what do you want to be? You're getting ready to graduate in the next 3 months. What do you want to be? And I walked in, like I said, I didn't know any cops. My familia were Mexicanos. We spoke Spanish at home, English at school. I mean, to the point where back then we had we used to see a show called Leave It to Beaver. And Leave It to Beaver used to talk to his dad and I always used to say, Dad, call him Dad. And then one day I remember I told my dad when I was a kid, I go, Apa, because we used to call him Apa or Papa. I go, Apa, ¿le puedo decir Dad? I remember my dad looked at me and he goes, Usted en la escuela habla inglés. You in school, you speak English. At home, you speak Spanish. And my name is Apa. And I go, okay, well, Apa, no more Dad because I Leave It to Beaver, right? So now I'm getting ready to graduate from high school. I go up to this counselor and I tell him, he goes, what do you want to be? And I go, I want to be a police officer. And he goes, do you know any police officers? Do you have any relatives that are police officers? This is 1978. And I looked at him, I go, no, I don't know any police officers. What do I need to do to be a police officer? I go, I know I need to be 21. I didn't know that. And he goes, well, since you don't have any relatives and I'm looking at your grades, I mean, you have good grades, but not outstanding grades. He goes, I see that your father is a construction worker. He was a pastor, but also a construction worker. And he goes, you have the body frame of a construction worker. He goes, why don't you become a construction worker? And I go, no, I want to be a police officer. He goes, no, I see you being a construction worker. And he goes, and they make very good money. You start off, and then he started explaining to me the construction business. I remember, Joe, when that happened, walking home from school, and it was like my whole world literally exploded. I mean, all my balloons of I'm going to be a cop, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. literally exploded because we were a Mexican family. We didn't know where the local college was. There was a school close to our house called Southwestern College. We didn't know there was a Southwestern College, a university, or San Diego State University. So I remember getting home and talking to my dad and saying, Dad, I guess I'm not going to be a police officer because I didn't know anybody, right? And my dad goes, well, why don't you get hired? Why don't you start working with me in construction? I go, it's funny, Dad. I go, that guy, my counselor, just told me that that's what I was made for, basically, to work construction. And there's nothing wrong with construction. But I wasn't a construction guy. There's nothing wrong. Trust me. My dad was great. My primos were great. They're awesome. But I wasn't that guy. I wanted to be a cop. So my dad says, well, David, he goes, if you don't want to work in construction, and it wasn't that I was lazy, but just if you don't want to work construction, why don't you get a job at General Dynamics? I go, okay, Dad. And during that time, that's when Run Baby Run, Nikki Cruz came on, The Cross and the Switchblade. I had seen the movie. I had read the book. And God was placing a burden in my heart to do what David Wilkerson did, go into the barrios. And instead of going to New York, I would go into Logan Heights. I would go to San Isidro. I would go into Otay. I would go to Imperial Beach, all the barrios where all the gangsters were, to go talk to them about the Lord. And it just happened. I got hired right after high school with General Dynamics. And one day I'm playing basketball. I had been working there 3 months. I'm playing basketball and I break my ankle playing basketball with a bunch of guys. So now I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm 18 years old. Now what am I going to do? So while I was healing, God was dealing with my heart. God started placing a burden in my heart to go and talk to gangsters, to go and talk to heroin addicts. So what I did, I remember I had a white little car. I basically got in my car and I went into the first barrio was Otay. And there was a guy by the name of Danny Otto. One of the pictures I sent you, if you could post that, it says New Life Outreach. He was my very first target. And this dude had just got out of Tracy State Prison, hardcore heroin addict. And I started doing what David Wilkerson did with Nikki Cruz. Every day I would go to the barrio and he'd be down there all loaded, or he'd be down there throwing party with all the homeboys, and they would see my car and they would run. They thought they knew I wasn't a Jura, but because I would always get out of my car with a Bible and talk to these guys about God, they were more afraid of me than they were of parole officers back then, because they didn't want to hear it. So I go over there and I start talking to him, and it took me about 9 months fasting, praying. By then I'm healed. I didn't go back to work. By then, God starts putting a burden in my heart to start a rehabilitation program. And here you're looking at an 18-year-old kid who's never used drugs, who had never drank beer in his life. I mean, I gave my life to the Lord when I was 13 years old, who had never smoked weed, never tried drugs at all. And here I am talking to these hardcore pintos. I don't know if you guys have ever heard. Well, I'll get into that. But I'm talking to these hardcore pintos about the Lord. So Danny Otto ends up giving his life to Jesus Christ, to the Lord. And I remember it was, by then, my father was pastoring the church in San Isidro, and every Christmas, we would have a Christmas play. By then, Danny Otto goes, hey, man, I want to change. Ando prendido. I'm addicted to heroin. I got a kick. And I go, listen, I can't take you to my house because my 2 sisters are there. My father's there, my mother. I go, but the church has a pastor's house and my abuelita lives in the front portion, but there's like 5 rooms in the back where I could ask her to give me a room, and maybe you could move in there, and it has no shower, no kitchen, no nothing, but I could help you kick. Dude, I didn't know nothing about kicking. I was an 18-year-old kid, you know what I mean? So this dude comes and he's there, and the only times he would eat is when because I was living with my parents at the time, I wasn't married, I would bring him breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you know how he would take a shower in December in San Diego? With a hose. I would get the hose and put it on top of him, and then he would take a shower. I mean, we didn't have a shower. It was just a little casita in the back, right? But God had placed that burden in my heart. So Danny, it's Christmas, and he's anda malías, and he's kicking it. We had a Christmas play. A lot of churches have Christmas play. The niños play Christmas play. I remember that he was in charge of the lighting, and it looked like a strobe light because the dude had the malía so bad. He was shaking so much, with the light when the kids are coming down, that it literally looked like the lights were going on and off, but it was because andaba malo. You know what I mean? But God ended up changing his life. And Danny Otto ended up becoming an associate pastor at the church, ended up living for God. And he passed away several years ago of cirrhosis of the liver. A lot of heroin addicts do. But God did a beautiful miracle in his life. He was the very first man that God changed. And I love that man like my brother. From there, God started using him and I. We used to go to the barrios. We used to go to downtown San Diego, pick up the drunks. By then, my abuelita had given me 2 other rooms. So now I had 3 little bedrooms. That's how I started, with 3 little bedrooms. Well, by the time I finished, I was there for 6 years, from the time I was 18 years old to the time I was 24 years old. By the time I finished, I had 36 men in my home. And these men were coming from Tracy, were coming from Tehachapi, from San Quintin, from different state prisons. They were even coming from Washington State. But you know, as I'm there, and it was like Victory Outreach, but it was called New Life Outreach. That's the name of the program. And I started it from the first guy there, and me and him, he ended up becoming my assistant director. And then, like I said, a lot of dudes came. And, you know, it's funny, during that time, I wasn't a minister in my dad's church. I was a kid. I was 19 years old, 20 years old. But my dad had a credential, a minister's credential. So as men were coming into my home, some of them, you know, had gotten locked up, parole violation. So I would go visit them in the county jail. And it was there that I met Weddle Sherm. It was there that I met Widow Sherm. I used to go in the county jail. Hopefully the statute of limitations is over now, but I used to use my dad's credential. Here's a little kid, right? A kid, 19 years old, going into the county jail with my dad's credential and say, hey, I'm a reverend, a pastor of a church in San Isidro, because they didn't have his picture, just his name. And I'm a David Contreras Jr. And my mom, believe it or not, used to make me burritos. So I would even use my dad's briefcase and I would fill it up with burritos. And I would go to the county jail. And while I was in the county jail, word would get around to all the vatos in there doing time. And next thing you know, hey, you want a free burrito? You got to go talk to this preacher. You want a free burrito? He has to lay hands on you and you get 2 burritos, right? So next thing you know, I had vatos from everywhere coming down. Hey, we want to see this guy. We wanted to see this guy. But the visits that I would get were like attorney visits. I would have hand to hand with the guys. The guy would be in front of me, no wall between us. So I was able to lay hands and pray for these guys. And it was there where I met Weddle Sherm. I met a lot of guys there, and God did do a lot of miracles in that county jail. So I'm there. So now it's 1984. Well, during that time, one of the things that how I got really, I guess, the Mexican mafia, the word Mexican mafia really stayed in the back of my mind. It was intriguing to me because from 78 to 84, how old are you, Joe? Do you mind if I ask?
Yeah, 51.
51. Okay. So you'll understand. How old are you, Paul? Same, man. You guys look young, man. I would have said 45, but está bien. Okay. So then you understand. During that time in the 80s, in the 70s, nobody would ever use the word M or Mexican mafia. And if you did, you were either going to be slapped or you were going to be put on check because it didn't exist, supposedly. So here I have at 18 years old through 24, all these pintos coming, like I said, from different pintas to my program. So once in a while, I would hear them talk. And they would be going, yeah, Simon, ¿sabes qué? Joe Morgan, este vato. And they would talk about La M. So, and then I would come in, you know, I'm the preacher there, right? So I would come in. So tell me about the MA. You know what? That doesn't exist. We don't know what you're talking about. So one day I pulled Danny out of the side. He was like my brother. I go, Danny, why is everybody so afraid to even say the word MA? And he goes, David, he goes, it's a prison gang. And he gave me the history and he goes, and you know what? You just don't, that's a word that you never use. Nobody talks about it. We all know it's there. And he goes, and I've seen a couple of times you've been teaching Bible studies and you've said, and you know, like the MA in there has, and he goes, don't do that, David. He goes, because a lot of these guys, they've been basically brainwashed. They fear the MA. And if they don't make it here, they got to go back in the pinta and nobody talks about it. I go, okay. But it was like a secret society. That's what it was. Secret society. And so now in 84, I gave up the rehabilitation program and I got hired. I finally was able to, you know, get into law enforcement. So I got hired with the Department of Corrections as a prison guard. This is in 84.
Can you stop right there really quick?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, how did the interactions go with Widow Sherm?
You know, the interaction with Weddle Sherm was very interesting. And the reason why, how I met Weddle Sherm was a guy by the name of Carlos Zuniga. Carlos Zuniga was a Chicano from a barrio in San Diego called Shelltown. And he had a brother named Nick Zuniga, Big Head Nick. And Carlos Zuniga was a stone killer. Carlos Zuniga loved to stab people, but he was from Shelltown, but he had long hair, he had a mustache, and he had a little thing right here. And this vato was thick. He looked like a Samoan. He looked like you, Paul. But this vato was all muscle, right? And this vato, when he did a lot of time, every time he would go to prison, it was for stabbings. He was sticker, but he was a handsome, good-looking guy, very personable. So he got hooked up with the Hells Angels. He got hooked up with a bunch of outlaw motorcycle gangs. It was more with the Hells Angels. So when he got out with his long hair. He went to a bar and somebody disrespected his girlfriend. So he goes up to him, he stabs the guy, he gets caught. Now they give him, I think they gave him 13 to 20 back then because it was indeterminate sentencing back then. Indeterminate sentencing. So he was the one that introduced me because he was from Shelltown to Weddle Sherm. He goes, there's a youngster in here. His name is Weddle Sherm, and this vato, he's one of the founders of a gang called Gamma Street, and he's up and coming. He goes, he's a little killer. He goes, but he wants your mom's burritos. I go, well, the only way that vato's gonna get my burritos, he's got to come down and hear the word of God. And when I first met Weddle, I was 21. And so Weddle was about a year younger. I think he was like 20, and he was there for the murder that he was convicted for. And I met with Weddle for about 9 months during his trial. And at the very end, I laid hands on him, and God touched his life. God touched his heart, and we had a lot of conversations. I was there when he was sentenced. Because I was, a deacon by now. I'm a deacon at my dad's church. By now, I was there during his whole trial, and after he was convicted, I remember I went back to the county jail, and for 2 weeks he didn't want to see me. For 2 weeks he didn't want to see me. Because he was angry. He was angry, I think, probably with God, because I never told him you're going to get out. God's going to do a miracle. We prayed for a miracle, but God put him in his place. Whatever he did, there's consequences to our actions, right? So, and the funny thing about it is, he was going to get the bus like a week later on a Wednesday. That's when the bus would come. And the funny thing about Weddle, prior to that, we would talk about God. He was a clown. He was always laughing. Hey, David, making jokes. But when it came time to be serious about God, he would listen. You know what I mean? And God would touch his heart. I remember seeing God touch his heart. And then, he'd pretend like nothing happened and walk back upstairs, reaching, going. But when he was there, he was Weddle. You know what I mean? He was who he was, Raul Leon, not Weddle. So that 1 week before he left to St. Quentin, he comes down from the tier. And because, I got there and I go, hey, so every time I would go, I would put his name down and he would reject it. So that time he came down, but this was a different Weddle. When he came down, it wasn't the same Weddle because he was high control. So they had him, shackled legs, waist, and arms. So he would come in, high power, right? I think it was a yellow band back then. He'd come in high power. And this time he sat down and he looked at me, and it wasn't the same Weddle. 2 weeks, he changed his facial expression, the way he looked at me, the way he talked toward me. He sat down and he goes, ¿Qué pasó, David? I go, what do you mean, ¿Qué pasó, David? Before it was, hey, brother David. I go, what? I go, hey, man. I go, I'm really sorry what happened, but you know what? God could use you in the county. God could use you in St. Because he goes, I'm going to St. Quentin. I go, God could use you, man. You know what? God, you could be a testimony for his power. And I remember he looked at me and he goes, nah. He goes like that. He goes, nah, chale. He goes, I'm going to be the leader of the MS someday. And I go, okay, you are? He goes, yeah. He goes, and you know what, Isse? You're going to hear, I'm going to run the MS someday. Just like that, from being 2 weeks before, pray for me, I hope God does a miracle, to all of a sudden just completely changed. And as he's talking to me, I'm not going to get into the conversation, but he told me everything, how the murder occurred. And I didn't want to hear it, but he starts telling me and he starts breaking it down. And then I did this and then I did that. And I looked at him and I go, why are you telling me that? He goes, I just want you to know, Isse, that you know what, that I am who I am and I'm going to run the MS someday. I go, but I don't care about your trial. He goes, but I just want you to know that that's who I am. And I remember I looked at him and I just go, Güero, I pray that God have mercy on you and that I know you gave your life to him. And I pray that God someday gives you the opportunity to go back to him. And he just laughed. And we left it at that. And then he left. So Carlos Zuniga, like I said, ended up, the dude that introduced me to him, ended up getting 13 to 20. I think that's what it was. So now Güero leaves. Now 2 years later, I get hired with the California Department of Corrections. I leave New Life. Matter of fact, the director, Danny Otto, the guy I told you about, I had sent you his picture. He ended up becoming the director of New Life. Rogelio and then Danny Otto became the director. And that program, believe it or not, from 1978 is still today in San Isidro. It's still a rehabilitation program like Victory Outreach. It's still very powerful. Out of the New Life, ministers have come out, missionaries have come out that have gone to Honduras, El Salvador, preaching the gospel of Christ. And pastors have come out. A lot of pastors have come out of that ministry, New Life, right? So now I get hired with the California Department of Corrections. And one of the, it's called OJT. While you're going through the academy, on the job training, they take you to different pintas. And one of the pintas they took us to was to Tracy State Prison. And I remember walking into Tracy, and I'm walking there with a group of correctional officers. And as we're walking, one of the things that they teach you, Joe, at the Corrections Academy is don't tell anybody who you are, where you're from, especially where you're from, or don't tell them anything personal because they basically tell you these inmates are going to basically try to use you to bring in dope, weapons, and cigarettes or whatever, and they're going to use you to bring in contraband. So don't tell them anything because they'll use that against you. So during I think it was 3 to 6 weeks back then in '84. I don't remember how long the academy was. It's been so long. So I think it was 6 weeks. We were brainwashed literally to say, man, when we got into the pinta, I'm not going to know anybody in there. I thought I wasn't going to know anybody in there. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to tell them anything about me, man, because they might start using, maybe try to, do something to my father, knowing he's a pastor, get me to do something. Nothing like that ever happened. But I just thought, right? So I'm walking into the pinta. There's about 25, 30 new correctional officers. We're walking in. There's a sergeant leading us and a bunch of other correctional officers around us. So we're all new fish, right? Walking into the joint. Tracy was the gladiator school back then, in the 80s. It was gladiator school. So we're walking in. As I'm walking in, we're going into the yarda. This vato on the other side of the yarda looks and he goes, "Praise the Lord." He says, "Praise the Lord." And that's in the apostolic world, that's how you greet each other. When you see somebody, you go, "Praise the Lord, brother, paz de Cristo." And you say, "Amen, amen," right? When I heard "Praise the Lord," I go, somebody knows me, right? So I look around and all of a sudden I see Carlos Zuniga, the same vato that introduced me to Güero Sherm. Long hair, big, muscular dude. He's running toward us and he's going, "Brother David, Brother David." He's going like that. And as he's running toward us, the guard tower, clock, racks around and a bunch of officers. And this vato was coming over out of respect to hug me, to say, "David, how are you?" You know what I mean? Because we got close talking about the Lord, right? And he gave his life to the Lord. So they take him down. They take him down. They handcuff him. They grab me. They thought he was there to attack me, right? So they take me to the warden's office. The warden goes, "Where's that guy?" So I tell him, "Listen, man, I used to be a real director of a rehabilitation program. I used to visit the county jail. It's in my background package. I wrote it down. It's all there." And this guy, he wasn't going to attack me. He was going to come greet me with the power of Jesus Christ. And he goes, "He's a killer. He's da, da, da." I go, "I understand." And he goes, "Well, we threw him in K-Wing. We threw him in the hole. He's in the hole now." I go, "Mr. Warden," I go, "Do you mind if I go greet him and just tell him, 'Hey man, are you okay?'" He goes, No. He goes, "It's nothing personal." He goes, "Now that we know," they wrote a big report because they had to take him down, right? So I go over there and the vato, I remember he was in his cell and they didn't open the cell, but I went over there and he looked at me and he goes, "Brother David." He tells me, "Brother David," right? And remember, I told you that I was running. It was there that after I left New Life, I walked away from God, right? So now I'm working as a correctional officer. I'm no longer serving God like I did when I was in New Life. And that's another story, long story. But I walked away from God. God never left me. So here's a vato at Tracy Prison telling me, Brother David, what are you doing being a correctional officer? I would have thought you would have been a counselor, not a correctional officer. And I go, Carlos, I go, hopefully, he goes, are you still serving the Lord? I go, Carlos, I'm not serving the Lord like I used to. I go, but God is always in my heart. He goes, brother, you did, God used you. And he goes, you know, he goes, it's funny. He goes, I haven't seen you in 3 years. He goes, I got 13 to 30. He goes, I'm getting out in 3 months. I go, what? He goes, yeah. He goes, I won my appeal. He goes, I'm getting out in 3 months. And you know what? I'm going to serve the Lord. And I go, that's good, Carlos. That's good. Well, as soon as he got out, he went back to heroin and they ended up killing him. They ended up killing him. But it's funny at Tracy, you know what I mean? So and then I was supposed to go to Tehachapi. Tehachapi wasn't ready, state prison. It was to be a level 4. So they sent me to CMC. And once again, I'm walking down my yarda in CMC and Avato on the other side of the yarda, Brother David, praise the Lord. And next thing you know, the whole yarda knew that I ran New Life, that my dad was a pastor. And it was because of that a lot of doors were open. But believe it or not, going back to the Weddle Sherm, I know I'm talking a lot, but I mean, hopefully your audience finds it informative. Um, it was there at the county. It was there at CMC that the warden, his name was Estelle, was his last name. I mean, I'm talking back in 85 now, right? 84, 85. And he calls me into the office. Now I'm working. I have my own theater. I have my own tier and I have my own building. And he calls me into the office once. All of a sudden, the security squad shows up to my building. And the security squad, they're called the Goon Squad. They're correctional officers, but they're the ones that wear the jumpsuits. They're the ones that hit all the houses, all the cells, and so forth. They show up, and instead of coming to get an inmate, they're coming to get me, a correctional officer, right? They come up. I was in the 3rd tier. They come up running upstairs, and everybody's going, the Goon Squad, goons. All the inmates are throwing themselves on the walls or on the floor. And I'm like, hey, guys, what do you guys need? He goes, you're going with me. The sergeant says, I think it was Sergeant Lopez. He goes, you're going with me. And I looked at him and I go, where am I going? And he goes, the warden wants to talk to you. And here's a brand new correction. I had just started. I was only there for about a couple of months. So I looked at him and he goes, the warden wants to talk to you. And I go, okay. So as they're walking me out, all the inmates, they're all yelling, ooh, orale, vato's dirty. You know, they're all thinking, you know, that I'm getting arrested by the Goon Squad, right? So I'm walking with them and they put a circle around me, no handcuffs, nothing at all, but they're walking me over there. And as we're walking into the warden's office, the sergeant stayed and he sits me down. So now I'm sweating like I mean, I'm sweating bullets thinking, what the heck did I do? Did an inmate say that I brought dope in? I mean, I'm thinking the worst, right? And I'm thinking, man, what did I do? So the warden looks at me and he goes, Mr. Contreras, goes, Mr. Contreras, David Contreras? I go, yes. And he goes, what is this? And I remember he threw a letter on my lap, throws a letter on my lap. And the letter said, Reverend David Contreras, New Life Apostolic Outreach, 3747 Sunset Lane. And up on top, it said Weddle Sherm. Well, it said Raul Leon. He was at, I think he was at St. Quentin at the time, or he was at Pelican Bay at the time. And he goes, what is this? And I go, what's a letter? He goes, was it addressed to you? I go, yes, sir. And he goes, you're in contact with Weddle Sherm. By now, Weddle Sherm had already made his bones. He already had stabbed a correctional officer. He was already an MM member and he was going up the ranks. And it was, even after he went to prison, he would still write to me. And I would witness to him because I remember I had 2 years still in New Life from 83 or 82 through 84. So I would still, he would write to me, say, David, keep praying for me. But you know, like I told you, I'm going to run. And he would write. So I would write back, hey, Weddle, I'm praying for you. The scripture says, and I would tell him. So now it's 3 years later, Weddle never got rid of the letters. But now as a correctional officer, I never wrote to him again. I never talked to him again. But the warden didn't know that. So the warden thinks that I'm a dirty officer. I'm in contact with the Mexican mafia. And it was then that I opened up to him and I told him, hey, listen, I used to run a rehabilitation program. He goes, you speak Spanish? I go, of course I do. You read Spanish? I go, yes. He goes, you understand Spanish? I go, yes. I go, I read it, write it, and translate it. And he goes, so he looks at the sergeant and he goes, hey, maybe you could start using Contreras on some of your debriefings because, you know, we have a lot of border brothers. You have a lot of people here that sometimes we get letters in Spanish and we can't read. Can you read them? I go, of course. So that's how basically I was introduced in the prison, how God works, right? God was introduced because of Widow Sherm to the security squad. So I started helping them once in a while with translations, with debriefings and with letters and translating and so forth. And that's how, and then by the time I left CMC in 87, Donovan was activated. I came to Donovan. I came basically as a prison gang expert because I already had been involved in a lot of debriefings. Yes.
So you left there in 87. Was
Yes.
I know what's his name was already there. Manson's crime partner. Was he there when you were there?
Yes, Tex Watson.
Tex Watson. Did you know him?
Yes. Yeah, I knew him. I knew all those guys. Yeah, I would talk to him.
Was he walking with the Lord in the prison?
Yes, he was walking with the Lord. But once again, I mean, one of the things that you do see in the Pinta, a lot of vatos carry the word as protection. They're not really real, but I think that vato was real. There was a lot of vatos that were for reals, a lot of vatos that were serving God, and there was a lot of hypocrites too. You know, a couple of vatos that I knew that had gone through my rehabilitation program and didn't make it. Now in there, hey, brother David, andan bien prendidos in there, you know, how you doing, brother? And then I would yell at them because they have the Bible and they were loaded in there. So I would believe it or not, I was Paul Tarsus. Then I became Paul Tarsus because then I would target those guys and get them dirty and get them out of the Pinta because I would get pissed. Don't play with God. That's one thing about me. I've never played with God. You know, I was either in or I wasn't. You know what I mean? I wasn't lukewarm. So whenever I saw a vato playing with God, I went after him and I took him out. And what I mean by taking him out, I found him dirty, wrote him up and got him out of that joint or threw him in the hole or something. I never played with God, but the vatos that were for reals, I gave him a lot of respect, of course. Yes, so Tex Watson was there. Tiny Contreras, you know who Tiny Contreras is? Tiny Contreras was on my tier. He's a gentleman. He's the dude that killed Cheyenne. When Cheyenne was thrown off the tier, he's the one that jumped on top of him and stuck him. He was, I mean, all those dudes, Indio Talamantes, I mean, all those old vatos were there. Yeah.
Tiny mainlining it, or was he?
No, it was a PC joint. The TMC East, where I was at, West wasn't PC. My joint was all PC. That's why Tex Watson was there, Indio Talamantes, all the old vatos that were PC at the time, Buggy Sosa from the NF, they were all there. They were all there. And believe it or not, I mean, I don't know, I'll mention it. My best informants, were the homosexuals. These vatos would give up the pruno, the heroin, the syringes, the tattoo. They would give up the shanks. I mean, and I started getting to a point, I was getting really good at that. And people actually would start thinking, hey, is Contreras bringing in shanks? I mean, every week I was getting shanks. I was getting pruno. I was getting heroin. I mean, I was doing really well because all these other officers didn't know how to talk to people. You know what I mean? A lot of them did. And maybe after 20 years, they learned. But dude, I only had 6 months on. So, I mean, I knew how to talk to gente, right? Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
I want to say one thing, David. On this show, usually I do a lot of talking. You know, I'm able to ask questions. I'm able to really interact more with our guests. But with you, David, I'm just in shock right now. You know what I mean? Your story is so like fascinating. It's got me like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want this conversation to end. You know what I mean? Because we're getting like the real stuff right here from someone that was in the pit. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
I want to say that, you know, that's why I'm so quiet right now. People are saying, is that a mannequin of Joe or what? But I'm just, like, so intrigued with everything you're saying. And I'm in awe. I'm in awe now, David. Yeah.
Well, you know what, Joe? Like I said, this is the very first time I've never talked about this. And, you know, this is going to be a blessing for my grandchildren because I want them to see this. They don't know these stories. They don't know that I started a new life. They don't know this, you know? So this is a blessing for me, for my grandchildren to see, for hopefully somebody that's out there that you're going to see how my story evolves back to Christ, you know, and how, you know, you're going to see that. Yeah. You had something, Paul?
Yeah. I was going to ask you, you know, having been in the joint myself and doing years and all that. So I was just curious, and you don't have to answer, you can answer this any way you want.
Yeah.
During the time, like let's say I was at Tracy,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there was cool prison guards there, man. There was jerks too, you know, especially in some of the goon squad.
What
But
year were you in Tracy?
probably 88 till about 91,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Okay.
and nothing bad, but you know, some of the officers, they would get tattoos from my homeboy.
Yeah.
You know, some of the guards and, you know, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And, you know, stuff like that and extra. Would you or would the prison guard generally like come down on stuff like tattoos and minor stuff like that? Or would you confiscate them a lot, or was there certain inmates you'd give more leeway to? And you can answer that any way you want, because I know I don't want to put you in the cross.
You know, I had a lot of informants. That's one thing about me, because I've always been good to talk to people. And my philosophy in life, and I've made a lot of mistakes. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've done a lot of things that I'm not proud of. I'm no saint. But one of the things that I always gave everybody respect, whether you were wearing green back then, because back then we had the green outfits, or we had the green pants and tan shirt, or you were wearing blue, I always gave you respect. You cross that line, we deal with it. You know what I mean? And I never, Pruno, I always got rid of Pruno because these guys would become violent. Tattoos, I personally never saw a correctional officer stick his arm in, but I know a lot of my friends that worked at St. Quentin in the 80s and the 90s, they got sleeved up by the inmates, by the NF. The NF was very good. One very good friend stuck his arm in and they sleeved him up. Did I look down on that? All I knew was that, you know what, this vato, you got to be careful with him because he's really over familiarization with these guys and it could become dangerous. And it's called the slippery slope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that you start with that. Next thing you know, you're bringing in, bugler, you're bringing in, drugs, or you're bringing in something, you're taking a letter home, and now they got you. I never did. I was always very careful. Were you ever in K-Wing?
Yeah.
Oh, so you got in trouble in there, huh?
Yeah. Come on, man. A couple times.
See how I got you?
Yeah.
Well, listen to this, man. When one of the things that I learned, because they tell you, don't tell nobody where you're from. As we were walking in to the Pinta, these inmates would always come up to these gabachos, or these, fresh guys off the boat. When I mean off the, they were Navy and they had just basically, that was their next job at a Pinta. They would always ask them, they would always tell them, hey, who's your favorite football team? And these vatos would say, oh, Green Bay Packers, orale. So the vatos from Green Bay. Kansas City, orale, he's from Green. LA, or the Raiders, orale, LA or Oakland, LA, orale. So he's from, that's how the inmates would know who these foods were from. And then they would start working in from there. You know what I mean? So like I asked you about K-Wing right now, so you got in trouble in there because that was the whole back then.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hey, man,
So
K-Wing, just real quick, after 10 days, it would give you a TV. It wasn't so bad.
oh, okay. Well, when I was there, they didn't. So going back to that story, yes, there were. I mean, it all depends, man. I mean, you're part of them. You know what I mean? You're there. I mean, you could overlook things. Now, if you're a perro, you're after everybody, then you know what? They're probably going to try to hit you, or you're probably going to get in some trouble there. You know what I mean? So you do overlook things, except, I mean, I never overlooked drugs. And if I was really after you, because once again, if you were a hypocrite or something, or I knew you were up to something worse, I would book you with the 115 for the tattoo. I would get you for that. But usually that was my way to get a shank, because once I book them from that, yeah.
Did you guys always know who the shot callers were?
Oh, a huevo. I mean, yes. One of the first things that I did, man, was get to learn how to read the yarda. Oh, even in a PC joint, we knew who the shot callers were. And a lot of correctional officers didn't know that. But one of the things that every time I would hit the yarda, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I mean, just, you feel it, literally you feel it as you walk in the yarda, something's not right. And sometimes you don't even know what it is, but just something in the back of your mind is saying something is not right. And you would look and look until you finally found it. It's a sixth sense that we have. I call it, that saved my life many times as a cop. People call it sixth sense. I say God's angels talking to my heart. God talking to my heart. And you know what? All of a sudden I'd find it. Orale, this is it. You know what I mean? So yes, we knew who all the shot callers were. And if we did, like I said, I had a lot of informants. A lot of people were giving me information at the time. Even at Donovan, I had a lot of informants giving me information. Yeah. So now I hit Donovan. So I go to Donovan. Now I'm working R&R, receiving and release. And like you see that movie American Me, when they first hit San Quentin. I mean, though they hit Folsom. Everybody strip down, put your hands up, turn around, bend over, spread your cheeks. I was at Vato at Donovan when the Pinta first opened. We had I guess it's called Yard 3. That became R&R. And I was that dude for about a year. That I was the one that ran the line, the scrimmage line, for all the newbies that would come in. And then the vatos that had attitude, we would throw them in the hole, from right there. The shot callers, we throw them in the hole back then. And then we get them ready to send them to Pelican Bay. Back then we would send them to Pelican Bay. So, but I was that dude, when you saw that movie, American Me, everybody hands up, turn around. I was that dude. So I did that. I was there at Donovan, and then I was there for and then right there, that's what I would read all the tattoos. And I would basically say, because a lot of vatos came in undercover, they were norteños, and right away, I mean, the norteño, and I would basically put them in the hole to save them, because it was a San Diego joint, it was a Sureños joint. And then the M guys, some guys would come in with a little tattoo, and I would right there and then. Vatos from Orange County. I mean, you vatos, I mean, everybody was doing time, but I would, as they're stripping down, I would go, what part of Orange County you're from? I say, how do you know? Contreras, the star. You know what I mean? That star always gave it away. Everybody from Orange County gave it away. And so I learned how to read tattoos, and I was involved in a lot of debriefings. A lot of the vatos that would come that would want to turn, we debriefed them. And it was then that I became a member of the prison gang task force. I would go to all the state meetings. I did that for about 3 years while assigned to Donovan. I would go with Carlos Chacon. He was with San Diego PD working intelligence at the time. Peter Manson, a group of other guys, and we would go to all the prison gang meetings. It was there that when Ronnie and Hector Ayala, going back before I tell you about that, when I was running New Life Outreach, Ronnie and Hector Ayala, this is back in like 83, 82, they both got out of the Pinta. Ronnie and Hector Ayala are two Mexican mafia members. And these vatos were from National City, and these were hardcore vatos. But when they hit the streets, everybody in all the barrios, here I am still preaching, going back to 84, 83, before going to corrections, everybody would say, the Ayalas are out, the Ayalas are out, because they were M. By then, people were starting to talk a little bit more about it. It wasn't but it was quiet. They're M, they're heavy. And one day, me and Danny Otto, we were in Logan Heights. We had gone to have dinner, and then we went to the barrio to go talk to people about Christ. And the two Ayala brothers were there. They were right there kicking back at the parque. And me and Danny Otto went up to them, and we talked to them about Christ. They had just got out of the Pinta, and we started talking to them about Jesus Christ. And I remember Hector was quieter. He was just real quiet, just looking at us, mad dogging us. He didn't want to hear it. But Ronnie was comical. That vato was like, orale. And then I remember he was real loud. You telling me about the Lord is saying, acting like I'm going, right? So we're talking about God. And I remember telling him, Ronnie, I don't know who you are, man, but God loves you and God wants to do a miracle in your life. And you know what I say? Someday, man, not today. Someday, not today. So me and Danny Otto, we gave him our tracks. We walked away. The reason why I'm mentioning, listen to this. So now it's, I'm working at Donovan State Prison. Now these two vatos kill. They hit, it was a auto shop right there off of National and 43rd. It was called Cacho's, I think, Cacho's Auto Shop. And they had, they killed, I think, three people, and two people got away. They stabbed them to death and shot them. I think, if I remember correct, it's been so long. But one of the things that I remember, I was working at Donovan at the time, that came about was that all three of the vatos had been stabbed in the butt. All three of the vatos. And that's an MO. That's something that Ronnie would always do in the Pinta. He would stick people, but for whatever reason, that vato had a butt fetish. He'd stick them in the butt. You know what I mean? He'd stick you over here, but as the vato was turning around, boom, he'd stick them in the butt. All of these vatos were stuck in the butt, right? By now, these two vatos are out of the Pinta, and we hear about these murders. I'm working Donovan, and as I'm working Donovan, I go, and I remember calling Carlos Chacon because he was working that case. I go, hey Holmes, I go, I know who did it. And he goes, what do you mean, man? He goes, it just happened. I go, I'm telling you, I know who did it. I go, it was Ronnie Ayala. And he goes, oh, why do you say that? I go, were they stuck in the ass? He goes, a huevo. I go, do me a favor, start working informants. I'll start working my informants in the Pinta, and we're going to find it. And lo and behold, I got a pinto. I got two pintos to turn that were doing a parole violation. They became the star witnesses against them. Chacon got some other vatos, a hardcore M guy, one guy, Manuel Mesa, got him to turn. He turned against them, and they were prosecuted because of that. So all that experience, even when I was serving the Lord, meeting these vatos, and now I got the sources to take them out. You know what I mean? And then, believe it or not, I ran into Hector, into Ronnie, probably about, how long ago? 6 years ago in death row. 6 years ago in death row. He doesn't even know who I am. I walked in and word was out, hey, Contreras is here. And he thought I was Steve Contreras, some other parole agent. And so he looks at me and he goes like this. So I went like this. He didn't know who I was, but I knew who he was. But little did he know that, I mean, it was my informants and Carlos Chacon, everybody's informants. They did a great job in putting a great case against these guys. And they're both in death row today. Yeah. So now I'm with corrections. I leave corrections. And like I was telling you, Joe, you asked me, well, how was it with corrections? You know what? It's a great job. They pay very well, but it wasn't for me. It just wasn't for me. I got hired with San Diego PD. I was 28 years old in 88. And I go with San Diego PD. And the first place where as soon as I get out of I think it was 6 months training, they send me to Logan Heights. So now I'm working Logan Heights. And Logan Heights back then, I don't know if you guys are familiar with San Diego. Logan Heights was like East LA. You know what I mean? That was a barrio. We had different barrios there. And I had the Pinta experience. I had the New Life experience. So I came in knowing 11550, somebody under the influence, because I ran the New Life. I came in knowing prison gangs and street gangs, working the Pinta. So I was a rock star. You know what I mean? Coming into the barrio. But one of the things different about me, and hopefully some of your listeners, maybe if they're from San Diego, they're going to tell you, maybe it'll be 2 or 3 liars, but the majority of them are going to tell you that I was very respectful. That, you know what? I always treated everybody with respect. All the viejitas in the barrios, I would personally go knock on their doors. I bring them comida. I was that cop. That, you know what, that little boy, I would mentor him. That little boy, I would, buy him a soda, and I would mentor these kids, you know what I mean? But I also kicked a lot of ass. Don't think that I was, Mr. Hi, everybody. No, you know what? If, there was a problem, I took care of it. You know what I mean? If they were burned, I remember one time, Calle 30, I had declared war on the poor people that they wanted to tax them. So they started taxing the Buena Viejita's house down. So I was the one that got my team together, and we went and we basically arrested everybody. I mean, so don't think that I was, Mr. Nice Guy. No, I put a lot of people in jail. I mean, I was that cop. I was friendly. I was respectful. But if you hurt somebody, especially an elderly person, you were going to have my wrath. You know what I mean? So don't think that I was, Mr. Happy all the time. No. I mean, there were times that, I took a lot of people down. I made a lot of arrests. So I'm working there. From right there, I went over to the gang suppression team. I worked there for 3 years, 3.5 years, 4 years. And then I got promoted to sergeant. From sergeant, I went to, I was the chief's personal assistant. I was a liaison to the Latino community. And at first I was a liaison not only to Latino, to the Arab American and the Jewish American community. And then those basically took a life of their own, and I stayed with the Latino community. I did a lot of programs. I did a lot of outreach, getting all the churches together. We were having a lot of gang violence, and we would get thousands of people and have marches. I was the one that was organizing as a cop, thousands of people to march against gang violence. And I would use all the churches, the priests, to go and march and basically stop gang violence. So from there, I went over to internal affairs. And then in the police department, internal affairs is looked down. When you walk in the elevator, everybody says, shut up, here comes internal affairs. I was that guy. So now I'm walking in the elevator, suit and tie every day. So I'm in internal affairs for 2 years, and I investigated a lot of, some dirty cops, some perverted cops, some racially motivated cops. But I was that cop that was fair. If you were dirty, I'd fire you. You know what I mean? If you were clean, you're going to come out okay. But if you're not clean, I'm going to find exactly who you are. So I fired a couple of cops, and I helped a couple of cops, and I saved a couple of jobs because there were false allegations. From right there, I went back to the gang unit, but now as a detective sergeant. I was the sergeant in charge of the team. And I went back to Logan Heights. I had Logan Heights. I had Sherman. I had all the main barrios in San Diego. I even had San Isidro. I had Nestor. I had all the main barrios. And it was there that I started getting exposed a lot to the prison gangs. I started getting exposed a lot to the kids. Remember when Barron, David Barron was recruiting the kids from Logan Heights? I knew all those kids. When they were getting recruited, I knew them. I knew every one of them. And I tried to help them, but the carteles, the money, got them. David Barron, we chased him numerous times in Logan Heights. Pato, Quiñones, these are all names that later became part of the Arellano cartel. I was there when they were coming into the barrio recruiting all these youngsters. And it's funny, I'll say this real quick. I know time is probably in essence here, but I'll say this.
We got about 15.
Okay. One of the things that I did notice that the first time that I was in the gang unit was like in 96. I was in the gang unit. I went now as a GST officer. We would always monitor all the funerals, because there was gang violence. People were getting shot and killed, monthly or weekly in the different barrios. So we would go and monitor, and then we'd stop the cars as they were leaving, get guns out of the cars and so forth. But one of the things that I remember was when I was in GST in 96 monitoring the funerals, you would go to the funerals and everybody had big baggy, khakis, pants, Pendletons, buckled to the top, big Charger jerseys, Bonnaroos, vatos, oldies, Angel Baby. And then as the priest is talking, all the cars would have Angel Baby and different old lowrider songs. So we'd be watching them. Okay, one car is leaving. Let's stop them over here. So we would see that. When I came back in 2006 as a gang sergeant, I was there for 4 years, and we did a lot of big cases, undercover cases. We did a lot of big cases before that, I went back. We again would monitor in Logan Heights and all the, barrios, the funerals. They changed. Now it wasn't no more the big khakis. And this is a gang barrio funeral, right? A homie died. It was no longer the big khakis, the big Pendletons, the gorros, the baseball caps, and, the big clothes. No, and no more oldies either. Now it was banda. It wasn't even mariachis. It was banda, and they had a banda there, or they had music coming out of the cars, and it was all Chapo, Guzman, los corridos. They were all corridos, norteños. And the vatos were no longer, there were a couple of vatos that still had the baggy pants, but the majority of them had pants, had nice shirts, and either cowboy hats. And I'm talking about homeboys. I mean, it changed. You know what I mean? The evolution of gangs. It was no longer, orale, sitting in the park. No, now it's somos los tres animales. And all of a sudden they'd be singing corridos, and I'd be watching them. And I tell my detectives, because they stayed in the gang unit when I left and became a sergeant and went to everywhere else I went. And they would say, Contreras, he goes, it's changed, man. He goes, now all these vatos are becoming carteles. These vatos now want money. So now they're working with the carteles de Mexico. And it's funny how I saw the change. You know what I mean? No more, the gangster. It was more cartel mentality. Make money, make money, make money. So, and then from there, I was there. I did a lot of undercover work with my team. I mean, one case, we took literally down a gang of killers, and we turned the leader, the main guy, into our informant. We rented an apartment and we put fake windows up, just like you see in the movies. We had our SWAT team there. He would bring the homeboys in to buy guns. And our excuse was, it was called Operation Stampede. Our excuse was to take all these guns to Mexico, to the Arellano cartel. So all the homies from all the barrios were bringing the guns over to this undercover house. And these vatos, I mean, they'd be coming in with AK-47s, AR-15s. I mean, they'd be coming in guns. We'd be buying them, taking videos of everything. By the time we took everybody down, we took down 33 guys. We solved 5 murders. The majority of the guys got life. A lot of them got life. And that was a big undercover sting. One of the times that we were doing the undercover, one vato comes in and he says, hey, he goes, I got a 357 Magnum, but before I give it to you, send it to Mexico. I'm going to go kill somebody right now. And we're watching this vato. We're on the other side of the mirror. And this vato goes, orale. He goes, orale. He goes, I'm going to be right back. He goes, I'm just going to go put a bullet in some pendejo's head and I'm going to bring it right back, send it to Mexico, give me my feria. Orale. So the vato takes off. And by now I'm the sergeant. I'm the one running the operation. So I'm getting units to come and follow him. I got the helicopter up. This vato actually went to a house. And right before he hit the door, everybody jumped on him. We got him. He was there to kill another rival gang member. We saved that vato's life. But we couldn't use it because we had to go on with the case. So we made an excuse why we arrested him and so forth. But we did a lot of, there was another time they were going to burn down a house full of kids. And we ended up saving their life. I mean, there was a lot of things. Everything was wired. The car, everything was wired. But I did a lot of cases like that. Yes.
Do you think, speaking of David, what did you think of seeing David Barron on Narcos, the TV show?
David Barron, I don't know if you knew this, but David Barron, his first murder, I think he was like 13 years old when he committed his first murder. And you know why he killed that man? Was because he was at a party. And a matter of fact, if we ever take you to San Diego, I'll tell you exactly where it happened. He was basically drunk and peeing on the guy's car, on his tire. The old man, un negrito, comes out and he goes, hey, what are you doing? Boom, he shoots him and kills him. That's how, and David was like 13 years old at the time. David Barron was a stone killer. And I knew, I never met David. I chased David one time. We hit a house in Logan Heights. He was there, but they basically flanked out a bunch of vatos with guns and basically started throwing guns and we're chasing him so David could get away. There were several times that we were real close to catching him in the United States, but he got away. But going back to David Barron, I don't know if you know this. You know that picture where they have him shot and he's laying in the right there and he's laying there with, I think he had a red sweatshirt. Underneath that sweatshirt, he had a San Diego PD vest on, bulletproof vest. 3 weeks before, we had taken like 96 vests to Tijuana police. And we had, because we have always maintained a good working relationship with him, we gave him the vest. And those dudes he was wearing a San Diego PD bulletproof vest. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows. I have all the morgue pictures. I got a chance to get all that because I was working, San Diego PD, the gang unit at the time when that happened. But yeah, that was very interesting, about that.
Wait, how did he get it? How did he get it? You lost me there. How he got the vest?
We don't know. We had given Tijuana PD 96 vests.
Oh, I see.
And so they gave it to the cartels. So nobody knows this, but he is wearing a San Diego PD and he didn't get shot in the chest. He got shot in the eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did,
if he hit the chest, he would have been okay. Huh?
I know, thanks to your vest. But I want to ask you about, I know that somebody had a green light on you.
Several times I've had green lights. So now I'm working the gang unit. My lieutenant, Andy Mills, calls me in 2009 and he says, David, he goes, I'm taking over intelligence. And he goes, I want you to come and work for me in intelligence. And I go, okay, what am I going to be in charge of? Because I was a sergeant, so I would have my teams. And he goes, what do you want? I go, I want Hell's Angels. I want Hell's Angels. I want M, because they're the ones that work the M cases. We work street gangs, but we work some M cases too. He goes, I want Hell's Angels. I want the Russians, because the Russians were hitting us pretty hard back then. I go, and I want the M, and give me those 3 and I'll go work for you. So he looks at me, because now it's a step up from gangs, street gangs, to intelligence, right? So he goes, I'll tell you what. He goes, I'll give you prison gangs. He goes, no, I won't give you prison gangs. He goes, but I'll let you work them with the teams. He goes, I'll give you Hell's Angels. I'll give you the Russians, but I'm going to give you Mexico. I go, Mexico? He goes, yeah. He goes, I have a team that basically works in Mexico, and you're going to run that team. Your job is to serve as a liaison and to go across the border and turn police officers, politicians, everybody you could get your hands on into informants to give us information of drugs, gangs, weapons that are, coming across the border, or killings that are kidnapping crews. So I go, listen, I can't take it. And he goes, why? I go, because there's a hit on me. He goes, what do you mean there's a hit on you? I go, yeah. I go, I haven't been to Tijuana in 5 years. And he goes, why? I go, I got a hit on me. And he goes, who put a hit on you? And I go, a vato by the name of Marcos Quiñones, Pato Quiñones. I go, the last time I arrested him, he basically said, if you ever come across the border, I'm going to kill you. And you know what? And he later became, I think he was David Barron's brother-in-law, but he was David Barron's number 2 man. After I arrested him, like in 2006, I was in the gang unit. By the time 2009, he did his parole violation. He did time for what I got him for. I think I got him for a gun. I don't remember exactly what I got him for, dope or something. He had gone back to Tijuana. He's now with the Arellano cartel, right? But Joe, one of the things when you're a cop, when you arrest people, some guys are drunk and some guys probably mean it. They'll say, take the cuffs off, and we'll fight, or they'll say, I'm going to kill you, Contreras, they don't mean it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. So when you get to the county jail, you take the cuffs off. Okay. The cuffs are off. Now what? Oh, I'm going to get you. Say, orale. Go ahead. Go in the county jail, right? They don't mean it. You know what I mean? They're just letting wind out. So I never took it seriously, but not with Marcos Quiñones. When he was in the back of my car, I mean, you could feel the devil in the back. That vato was just quiet. And I remember he just got up right real close to the screen and he whispered in my ear, I'm driving. And he goes, Contreras, I'm going to kill you. I said, he goes, if I ever catch you in Tijuana, if I ever catch you in Mexico, valiste madre, cabrón. I remember he said that. And when he said that, you know when somebody means it, right?
Yeah.
So I look at the vato, I go, the good thing is I don't go to Mexico. I was lying at the time. I would go down there and eat all the time, right? I mean, it's right across the border, man. Estoy gordito porque me encantan los tacos, right? So I go, I don't go there anyways. It says, you'll never catch me. Catch me over here. I said, we'll do what we have to do. Vas a marchar, cabrón. He said that. So I get him out of the car, book him, throw him in the jail. And 3 years later, I find out he gets out. And right before he got out, he ran into my ex-partner, Van Cruz, and he runs into him in Logan Heights right before he went to Mexico. This is like in 2006 and 2007, 8. And he tells him, tell Contreras never to cross the border. And my partner looked at him and goes, are you threatening him? No, just tell him never to cross the border. So it always stayed in the back of my mind. And you know what? I literally, for about 4 years, I didn't cross. Not because I was afraid, but because why? Why put my life on the line for what? You know what I mean? Not because I was afraid, but why? So I never crossed. So now my sergeant is telling me, I want to offer you, my lieutenant is telling me, I want to offer you a job as Mexico liaison. So I tell, this is how God works, right? So I tell him, you know what, I can. I go, there's this dude over there. I go, you know what, I think he means it. And I'm not going to put because I'm going to be in the open with, the politicians, with the police. I'm going to be no undercover. This is the real deal. And I go, I don't think so. And he goes, well, think about it. No lie or exaggeration. 3 weeks later, he calls me and he goes, David, come into my office. So I go into intelligence. He takes the newspaper out and he goes, you know this guy? And it was Marcos Quiñones, and he had El Zeta. And I go, yeah, is this the dude who put the hit on you? I go, yeah. And he goes, he just got arrested and he's on his way to Mexico City. You want the job? He goes, please take the job. I go, I'll take it. So, I mean, how God works, right? So now I'm working in Mexico. Now I'm a liaison for law enforcement. During my time there, I was there for close to 5 years, 4.5 years. I brought back 17 homicide suspects from Missouri, from New York, from different places that we would catch them in Rosarito, Michoacan, different places. And I basically started hunting men, a lot of hunting guys, going after guys from LAPD would come down and say, hey, listen, help us find this guy. He killed a cop. And we would basically go on the hunt because we would cross the border. I would cross the border with my team every day. every day. Another guy this is a good story. I'll say it real quick. This guy had just killed his next door neighbor. He had stabbed his next door neighbor. Just got out of the pinta. He goes into the barrio in Encanto, and he thought he was Mr. Chingon because you know what? He was a big future MM member. They're having a party at a house. This vato, everybody said, "Hey, this vato's here." Everybody give him respect. So this Mexican guy that's there, he's a painter. He was worker. Is at the party. Him and his wife. His wife is very beautiful. They're dancing, and this dude comes up to him, and he pushes him. This dude just got out of the joint. No respect. Pushes him. Starts dancing with his wife and starts grabbing his wife. This man is from Mexico. This is a good, hardworking man. He sees it. He goes up to him. And when he goes up to him, the vato just got out of the pinta, takes out a fileros, get ready to stick him. This vato, some way or another, got a chair, cracked him over the head. They fought for the knife. He ended up stabbing him and ended up killing him. This guy from Mexico. So this vato from Mexico goes back to Mexico. The wife, everything was destroyed. Now this vato is hiding out in Mexico. We end up putting a tracker on the wife's car. Now I'm working in Mexico. I got to find this guy because he just murdered a vato, right? But it's probably self-defense. We know that, but this vato doesn't know that. He's more afraid of going to the pinta, the M hitting him, because this vato was a heavy dude, right? So how we caught him, we had heard that he was in Ensenada. And while he's in Ensenada, it was during Christmas time. By now, about a year had gone by, 6-8 months have gone by, but we're still tracking him, right? We had the tracker on the wife's car. It took us a while to put it on. And we finally see her every weekend going to a certain house in Ensenada. So by now, I'm working with Tijuana SWAT, Tijuana PD, military, state police, federal police. I'm making liaisons everywhere. I got camaradas everywhere. So this time I take the state police with me. So we're basically watching the house, and it's during Christmas. And as we're watching the house, I remember I had binoculars. It was like we had gotten there like at 12 midnight, and my shift was night shift. So I was there all night long. The following morning, one of my detectives couldn't make it. So I was there literally for 2 days. And now it's about 6 o'clock and nobody's come out of the house, but the car's there, but we haven't seen them yet. And as we're there, I have binoculars on the house. I'm down the street. I'm in Mexico. I'm right there in Ensenada. All of a sudden out of the house, 2 men come out with turbans and a beard, like Osama bin Laden. They come out of the house. So I look at them and I go, hey, and I'm on the walkie-talkie with the state police. They're on the other side. And they're all going, ah, cabrón, ahí está Osama bin Laden, cabrón. They're all laughing. And I go, ¿a poco son árabes? He goes, no, son mexicanos, cabrón. ¿Quiénes son esos? So we didn't know who they were, right? So they come out, they get in the car, and she's with them. So she gets in the car, and these vatos are dressed all in turbans. So I'm thinking, did he become a Muslim? I mean, literally overnight, right? So I'm right there with my team. So we follow him. We didn't make the stop yet because we didn't know who these dudes were. We didn't want to blow the one time we had to arrest this guy. So they go to a church nearby, and the church had a Christmas play. And these vatos were part of the play. And the homicide suspect was Melchizedek, one of the 3 kings. So these, nobody will believe this, right? Yeah. So this vato goes in there. So I send one of my detectives and I send an undercover state cop, vayan adentro, see if it's him. Because they're going to a Christian church, these Arabs, because we thought they were Arabs, right? So they walk in and these vatos come out. They immediately call me. They go, Contreras, he's Melchizedek. I go, who the heck is Melchizedek? He goes, he's one of the kings. He's playing one of the characters of the nativity set. So as soon as this vato comes out, gets in the car, woo, we all jump on him. We arrest him. So we brought him across the border dressed like an Arab with a fake beard. Yeah,
that's funny.
What are the chances, right? What are the chances? Yeah.
That's bro. But we better start bringing it home.
We'll start bringing it home. So basically, I worked intelligence, and yes, Mayo Zambada also put a hit on me on that one right there. It's a very long story, but the bottom line is they put me and my wife in a hotel up on the top floor there at San Diego at one of the major hotels there. And we were there for about 5 days until the hit was taken out. That's a very long story. And how I got that hit is because we were after there was a deputy sheriff from LASO that was murdered by the Avenues. And one of the main guys had went to Michoacan. And the only way that I could catch him in Michoacan was taking the military in. And I ended up going to Juarez. And to make the story short, while I was in Juarez, some things happened. Mayo Zambada put the hit on me. My wife and I were having dinner at a really nice restaurant. After I got back from Juarez, I had been there for a week. And I get a call from the FBI SAC at the time. And he goes, Contreras, where are you? And I go, I'm having dinner with my wife downtown San Diego. He goes, there's a hit on you. I go, yeah, okay. No, Mayo Zambada put a hit on you. And there's a team right now in front of your house. They're supposedly we're listening to them on a wire, and they're coming down to kill you. And I go, why do you say that? He goes, did you just fly back from El Paso, Texas? I go, yes. He goes, were you in Juarez? He goes, yes. Did you get back Friday at 3:00? Yes, they know that. How do I know that? Because we're hearing them on the wire. So they're coming down. That there's a team down here to kill you. And DEA actually lifted the hit on me. But yeah, that was another time that we came very close, and they were going to kill my wife and I. But to end the story, I know we've talked a lot about my life story, but this is the important part, Paul and Joan. When I left the PD, from intelligence, I went to narcotics, and we worked some major cases. We worked a lot of major cases in narcotics, major cases. Well, when I left the police department, I found that I was addicted to adrenaline, because as a cop, every day when you're a patrol officer, and sometimes even as a detective, your adrenaline goes from 0 to 100 2 or 3 times a day. So you become addicted to adrenaline. So I went literally on a Monday, from serving a high risk search warrant. We were serving 1 to 2 warrants a week. I mean, we would go in blazing doors, cut the pie, and take people down. I went in on a Monday serving a high risk search warrant. Tuesday, I went to Donovan because I took my son to go see where I basically used to work at. And I retired that Tuesday. Wednesday, I had a knee operation, a knee replacement. That's another long story. I got hit by a car, but that's a long story. But so now for 3 months, all of a sudden, I'm going through withdrawals because there's no more phone calls, no more pager, no more adrenaline. And I'm literally like a caged lion in my house going, what now? I mean, I've lived with purpose and mission oriented all my life. And all of a sudden right now, there's nothing. I'm laying there. So when I finally healed, I wanted to get that adrenaline going again, Joe. So what I did, I opened up a PI company in Mexico, and I would cross the border 2 or 3 times a week. And every time I'd cross the border, my adrenaline would go up because, I mean, you're on your toes. I mean, that's trucha, you're watching your 6 because you're in a foreign country again, no longer as a cop. So I did that for 5 years. And basically in 2019, I gave the company to my partner. I moved here to Florida. I'm now living in Fort Lauderdale. Aquí tienen su casa. I live in Fort Lauderdale. I moved over here to write a book. And when I got here, I started writing a book about my life, but it's going to be fiction. I worked a lot of very interesting cases, a lot of murders that we worked, of people that we caught in Mexico. So I'm writing my book. And one day my wife and I are walking on the beach. We go for a walk. A detective, a good friend of mine, calls me and he goes, Sarge, he goes, I just called to tell you that I'm ending it. I go, what do you mean you're ending it? He goes, I can't live anymore. And this vato had just retired 3 months before. And he was going through the exact same thing that I had gone, where your adrenaline, you know. And what happened was, he goes, I don't know what's wrong with me, man. He goes, I went to go see a doctor. I just retired. I don't know what's wrong with me. So I started doing research about PTSD. And it was right there, Joe, that I said, you know, everything that he's describing that he's feeling, I've been feeling it, but I've been getting my fix crossing the border. You know what I mean? Getting the rush going. But now that I'm here, you know, and you know what happens, guys, and I'm going to just give me 3 more minutes. I'll be real fast. One of the things that happens to us, Joe, is that, and I'm going to do one pretty soon on Chicano or on gang members, because they suffer from PTSD. Matter of fact, I already got the right person that's going to come on. I'll tell you about it after the show. But what happens is, as a cop, as a person, we see a lot of military, doctors, pastors, a lot of ugly, traumatic events. And what happens is because you've only been on the job for 2 or 3 years, you see your first suicide in the first 6 months, you see your first SIDS death, you see your first shooting, you see your first stabbing, you see your first hanging, and you go on with life. We get all those things, Joe, and we put them in your heart and we compartmentalize them because we can't be weak. When I saw my first suicide, the mother's right there crying, and the young man's blood is all over her hand, and she's weeping. I have to tear her hands off because the guy blew his head off. I can't right there and then start crying with her. I can't say, "Oh my God, no, man." I mean, I gotta act professional and take care of it. And when I went home that night after that girl was raped, after the little baby died in my arms, I had to go home. You know what I mean? So, and I knew that the next day I had to go back to work. So we compartmentalize, we get everything and we put it.
Yep.
Whether you're a gangster or whether you're a cop or whether you're in the military, you compartmentalize. And it's in those moments, years later, when you're asleep at night and all of a sudden you have nothing to do, these little things start leaking, these boxes start leaking. And all of a sudden you start remembering things that you don't want to remember, or certain things happen that remind you of that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, and then all of a sudden, because you had basically compartmentalized, but they broke. And it was because of that, Paul, that I started a program called Sheepdog Assist. I put together a 4-hour training. I taught it to a group of LAPD cops that showed up for one of my first trainings in Fontana. It went very well. It was very well received. I don't charge a cent. I get calls. I'm surprised my phone hasn't gone off. I mean, I live over here East Coast time. Some of these people call me from San Diego, from Los Angeles. It's 9 o'clock your time. It's 1 o'clock my time, but I don't care. I'll take calls at 2 in. Somebody's saying, "Hey man, I'm suffering," and I help them. I don't charge a cent. Everything is out of my heart. It's for free. And that's what I started. And to end it, a year ago, like I said, God used my son to reveal God's grace. And it's because of that that I could talk to you guys today. I could talk to your audience, and I could basically tell you that, you know what, Jesus Christ is real. I denied him. I was that guy that denied him for 36 years. After I left New Life for 36 years, I mean, I partied hard. I lost my first wife. I lost my marriage. And it's by God's grace, man, that God used my son to bring me back to him. And if there's somebody listening, please look at my site. It's www.sheepdogassist. The assist stands for Active Critical Incident Trauma. Call me. I won't charge you a cent. I always have an ear to listen, and God loves you and God can heal you. But if you don't want to go through the Lord, there's a lot of programs that I could give you a referral to: counseling, medication, doctor, psychiatrist. But the bottom line is God can heal you because he healed me, or he's still healing me, you know, as days go by.
Yeah, you're a great man of God, and I just thank you for coming on today. And I really hope we can get you on again.
It would be an honor.
Your stories, but from what I see,
Yeah.
when you were 18, you were helping like heroin addicts and people on drugs and stuff like that, and now you're helping people that were addicted to like adrenaline, like what you said, or
Yes.
people that have PTSD. It's a different kind of addiction or different kind of dependency or different kind of problems, whether it's mental issues or anything like that, because mental issues are real. They're real. Yeah, I have a lot of friends that have been through it, you know what I mean? And I have a long story too to tell, but yeah, I understand all about that, you know, and yeah, it's amazing to everything that you're doing. And I just pray that God give you the strength to carry on what you're doing, and that just God will give you that blessings upon your life more. You know what I mean? That way, I know when you get blessed, you're blessing others. I could tell by your spirit. And man, just grateful for you. Very grateful for you.
Thank you, brother. Much appreciated. Keep us in your prayers.
Yeah.
And refer people to me. I'll be there. Like I said, if it's a 1, 2 in the morning, it doesn't matter. I'll listen, and then we'll go from there. And yeah, maybe one of these days in the near future, I could tell you some of the stories that through Sheepdog, people that we've been able to help. It's been a big blessing. And for me to be a blessing, it's a blessing for me by God's grace.
Definitely. And I'll like tell you my story one of these days too.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have you on my show. Let's get you on my show, God willing.
For sure. It's a long one. It's a long one. and it was an uphill battle. And
Yeah.
Paul knows we've been
Mhm.
friends for 35 years, and
Yeah.
he knows my story. So,
Yeah.
but again, just thank you so much. Just really, really appreciate you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. God bless you
Yeah.
guys. And thank you once
Yeah,
again.
just really quick, man. We really, again, like Joe said, we really appreciate you. We want to have you back on and
Yeah.
do some question and answer with you.
Yeah.
You know, there's just so much we could have talked about, but you know,
Yeah.
time's short. But I wanted to really quick, briefly, bro, tell us about your two podcasts again and where they can find them.
Yeah, the first broadcast, the one that's from my heart, it's Sheepdog Assist. Sheepdog, you could actually see it on YouTube. Just Sheepdog ACIST. Sheepdog ACIST. I have different guests on my show. I've had Gil Carrillo from the Night Stalker. I've had a lot of celebrities come on my show, and I've had doctors come on my show, pastors come on my show, pastor's wife, a young lady, Deborah Leon, her son committed suicide. She was on my show. So, I mean, I basically cover everything. And if you know anybody that would like to be on my show, Joe, I would love to have you on my show. Maybe we could talk later about that. I'll give you my number. And, but we basically help people. The other one is because I love boxing. I've been following boxing my whole life. It's called Rolling with the Punches TV. Rolling with the Punches TV. We have different guests, world champion, former champions, promoters come on our show, and we're on every Sunday live on Facebook. And it's Rolling with the Punches TV. That's a great show, but the one from my heart is Sheepdog Assist.
Cool.
That's the one.
Yes.
And all that information will be down below in the comments. So
Perfect.
click on there and go see.
Yeah.
Go see all those things. You had an interview with Mundo Mendoza,
Yes.
Valmar from the Denzel movie. What's it called?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I
A
was-
lot of guys. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen some of your shows too, and it's amazing. The one with Mundo Mendoza, the
Yeah.
part 1, 2, and 3. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Like if you want good content, just click down below and check out David's show.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. And hopefully, I'm going to be going down to LA. One of the things that I'm going to be doing, I'll be real quick. I'm going to open up an old homicide case. A guy by the name of Howie Steinler. I think it's Steinler. He owned the LA gym, downtown LA. He was murdered back in 1975. And they found him in his car, stabbed to death or shot to death. I'm going to be reopening that case as a cold case through my boxing show. And I'm going to be in Calabasas. I'm going to be over there for 3 weeks working with LAPD. So I'll make sure, man, we get together at least for a steak or a sandwich, a taco or something. But I want to shake you guys' hand. All right. So we'll meet when I'm down there.
We're gonna hold you to that, Essa.
Oh, I'm telling you, we're going to meet. We're going to meet. I'm going to be down there the last week of May for 3 weeks.
My
So
last
I'll
question.
definitely call you guys.
My
All
last
right.
question, bro. Last question before
Yes.
we let you go, bro.
Mhm.
You have to give why. Fury versus Joshua and why.
Oh, it's going to be easy, man. I mean, it's going to be Fury. Fury is an outstanding boxer. I mean, we haven't seen a guy like Fury. He literally moves like a light middleweight. I mean, the guy moves very well. He hits very hard. And Joshua, we've already seen that he has a jaw that he will go down. I mean, what's his name? Exposed him. He's been exposed several times. Klitschko exposed him, but so did Randy Reese exposed him. So no, I think that's going to end by a knockout. I mean, because he could only run so much, but Fury, he moves around the ring, he cuts the ring. He's special. He's a very special fighter. Yes.
I lie. I got one more.
Okay.
We just lost Marvin Hagler.
Yes.
There's always debate who won that fight between him and Sugar Ray. Who took it?
You know what? I would have given it to Marvin Hagler.
Okay.
I would have given it to Marvin Hagler. Marvin Hagler was one of a kind. If he would fight Canelo today, Canelo would be in a lot of trouble. That was a different boxing era. But yeah, watch my show, man. It's pretty good. We have some really good fighters come on that show.
Yeah, man. We thank you again.
You're welcome, guys. Thank you.
We thank you for coming on. Thank you, Big
Yeah.
Joe, for always being there. Thank you again for coming on the show. Follow Sheepdog Assist. Follow his boxing program. We'll see you. God bless you. How
God
do
bless
two
you.
gangsters and a former cop get together? Jesus Christ.
Exactly. God bless you. God bless you, Joel. God bless you. All right.